Welcome to the Ghost Talkers podcast, the show dedicated to unsolved history and paranormal mystery. Each week, we delve into something new, from true ghost stories to conversations with psychics, authors, historians, and the dead. If you're scared right now, it's probably because you just listened to Ghost Talkers podcast.
Hello and welcome. I'm investigative medium Laine Crosby, here with my co-host, Ghost of Gettysburg author and historian Mark Nesbitt, and you're listening to Ghost Talkers on theghostchannel.tv. Hey Mark, how are you doing?
Hey Laine, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce to our listeners Dr. Charles Emmons, or Charlie to me because I've known him for 25 years. Charlie is a professor of sociology at Gettysburg College. I actually went to Charlie early in my career as a ghost writer, and because he has done a lot of work in his sociology department with the students at Gettysburg College in analyzing and studying some of the ghost stories at Gettysburg. So at any rate, Charlie is one of my dear friends. So it's really a pleasure for me to talk with him today.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
Hey,
Charlie.
Hi, Mark. Hi, Laine.
How you doing?
Fabulous. Are you fabulous?
I'm doing all right.
I'm
Okay.
fabulous too. Well, we're so thankful that you could come on the show today. We appreciate your time. I know you're busy and you're heading off to parts of Europe.
Yep. Greece, Scotland, and England.
Oh, how wonderful.
That's one of the things we want to talk about today, too, isn't it, Laine?
Yes.
Because a lot of this, Charlie, has to do with some paranormal research that you're doing, right?
Right. The scientific search for spirit. And, of course, the people in England and Scotland have been interested in this officially, scientifically, even longer than the Americans.
Right.
Tell us about your sabbatical project, what it's all about.
Okay. I call it the scientific search for spirit, which means that I'm interviewing scientists mainly, although actually also people who have a scientific methodology. In fact, Laine, I want to interview you, even though somebody might say, well, she's not a scientist, she's spiritual and so on, but you are actually an investigator, and so it'd be fun to talk to you about how you know what you think you know, and also Mark, of course, who's involved in various aspects of this. So it's not just PhDs in physics, but a lot of them are, things like that. And so I'm asking them, what evidence is there for life after death or consciousness apart from the body? And then some of them are going to say, well, we don't have the evidence. You know, that's all parts of the argument is what I'm interested in. And in England, I want to meet with the Ghost Club, founded in 1862. Charles Dickens was a member.
Wow.
And some of these people with, got Nobel Prizes, like William Crookes, belonged to the Ghost Club, and he invented the cathode ray tube for X-rays.
Right.
So there are a lot of people like that who are still interested in these phenomena. And then there's a sociology group at University of York that has already responded and asked me to give a lecture there. So they're cool. It's Anomalous Experiences Research Unit in the sociology department at University of York. So those are some of the things that I'll be doing when I'm over there.
Charlie, that's interesting because, and we had talked about this before, because of it seems that whenever some serious work is being done in the paranormal by serious award-winning people, and I think, of course, of William James back in the 19th century. I mean, these people, these serious scientists put the same effort, the same mind, the same techniques, scientific techniques, they have applied to other disciplines. They put those same tools to work in paranormal. And yet once they do that, for some reason, they are ridiculed. And the mainstream science then thinks they've gone off their rocker, which is not the case. And we've talked about that before, and I think that's why your contribution to this is really, really important, because you're going about it in a very, very scientific way, as you always have.
Yeah, and that tends to be true. Like William Crookes, he had such a high reputation. Instead of him losing his reputation in the mainstream science area, they would just not pay any attention whatsoever to what he was doing with the paranormal. So that's one thing that happens. Now, of course, you're not of a status of somebody like that, then you just might get fired or, you lose your status in mainstream as well. But then oddly enough, there are some people I've interviewed who said, hey, I don't have any problem. Like Russell Targ, he said, I never have any trouble getting published because the CIA gave me $24 million to do this research, and we were working at Stanford. And, so he kind of thinks that he doesn't get it that that's a problem,
Yeah.
And then there's other people who, like Dean Radin. He says he's a big deal in parapsychology, ESP experiments in the laboratory, and he says I'm just getting published in medical journals now more than in parapsychology journals. So there are some people who are breaking in to the mainstream. So it becomes actually a lot more interesting and complicated than I thought.
Well, that is. The quest for the scientific end of it is so important. I've always looked at myself, at least before, as a collector of data. I collected all these stories, over 1,000 just of Gettysburg alone. That's data that we can use, even though it's in some cases anecdotal. You get enough anecdotal information, and it does become data. You can start.
Oh, sure. You look for patterns in the data. That's what I've always argued. You don't know if any one story is definitely true, but when you see patterns in so many of them, then you're starting to learn something. Exactly.
And yet people still need to know about the science. In fact, remember at Lilydale just this past week, we ran into the fellow who came to both of the lectures that we were involved in and sat right in the front row. He was an electrical engineer.
Yeah.
He just emailed us not too long ago, and we're going to keep in touch with him because he is developing some kind of experiments that we're going to be able to use. And now we're getting an interesting combination. We have the anecdotal data, and then we're going to have some scientists involved here. Let me ask you this, Charlie: do you think we're any closer now to proving life after death and ghosts and the paranormal than we were, say, back in the 19th century?
I think we are, in one sense, and that is that we're able to get lots of evidential things. And, for example, in the near-death studies area, they're developing much better documented cases where people are out for a couple of hours, and you're able to show that they are actually able to see what's happening to them while they're being operated on when they're supposed to be dead. Because before, the debunkers could say, oh, well, we're not really sure exactly when they were out, and the data aren't really confirmed. But the picture is being filled in a lot more to show that this is actually happening. Plus, we're getting more on the theoretical end, like understanding quantum physics better makes it possible to have some clues as to how the brain operates in terms of consciousness and so on. Not that we've got it all figured out, but I would say that, we are making a lot of progress.
Charlie, I was writing a blog about this yesterday, and a detective wrote me back, and he mentioned that that people are not really accepting of this science. That scientists are going out there, and they're doing whatever they've been doing before, and they're looking at this as a pseudoscience. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. I think that maybe media is just not covering this as much as some other topics.
Yeah.
I know right now J.J. Abrams has his new show out called Fringe, and fringe science is just the science on the edge that can't really be proven yet. But one of the promos that they have for the show, they have a lot of promos now on YouTube for the show where they're documentary-style promos, and they're talking to professors at institutions like Harvard, and they're talking about things that they've learned. And one of the professors says, when we switch over from analog to digital in the next few years, I think that scientists are going to be able to see more and more that heaven is just another frequency. And I think that's what Einstein and even Edison were talking about, that after death, our spirits are just on another frequency. Do you think this is becoming more mainstream in the scientific community?
Well, I would say that, it's a complex phenomenon, so that you get more and more people who are mainstream scientists curious about this, and I can see this in the group I belong to called Society for Scientific Exploration. And many of these people of course, have to do things outside the mainstream, and they complain about not being accepted by the mainstream. But, okay, first of all, there are a lot more scientists who are doing this, at least in the closet. And if you ask individual scientists, you'd be surprised how many think that there's something to this. Where the biggest problem is on the level of grants. So like the National Science Foundation, they got several hundred applications. There's a big stack, and their job is to make the stack smaller. So if they say a word like UFO, it's going out. Right. Or, ESP, out. So sure, there's a problem there. And there might be 2 or 3 people at your college or university who are going to make it hard for you. And so that really has a dampening effect on things. But you get figures like 50-some% of scientists in the natural sciences think that ESP has already been proved or is likely, 60-some% in the social sciences, and 70-some% in the humanities. So you begin to see that, as Andrew Greeley said, the paranormal is normal. So you ask the individual scientists, you'll find a lot more support, and they all have secret experiences and stuff. But if you go up to the level of big-time grant money, it's not there. But what's going to happen, I see this happening already, is that when this starts making money for people, then capitalism is going to latch onto it. That's why things like yoga and meditation are being mainstream, because they save money in the health industry. And that's why Dean Radin is getting published in medical journals, because they can see that this will have some applications for health and so on. So it's going to come in the back door, the side door, and eventually the front door.
Right. And I think that producers such as J.J. Abrams, they're great, but sometimes they're over the top. But it does put questions in people's minds. And if Hollywood is out there talking about this, then that opens minds a little bit more. And eventually that may sift down to grant money.
Yeah. See, what happens in the meantime, I've seen this like in my UFO book, At the Threshold, yes, that media are a mixed blessing, because they'll get the information out there when the mainstream won't publish it. But on the other hand, they often sensationalize it. And so, that means that your university is going to cringe when they see you on TV. So it's like a two-edged sword.
And you see that, after talking with the electrical engineer that we had, I don't want to mention any names without his permission, but at any rate, some of the stuff that he put in that email to us, you look at that and then you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, ghost hunters and paranormal state and some of these other things, if you look at that, they're, according to him, they and we have been doing it all wrong. You know what I mean? And that's why I think this scientific end of it, getting scientists involved is absolutely crucial. And I think I mentioned this to you before. I think the science involved should not be parapsychology. I think psychology is a wrong science. The two sciences that should be involved would be neurobiology and physics.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that, except I would say all scientists can be involved. All kinds. I mean, here I am, a sociologist, and I'm doing the sociology of science. I'm pointing out where the flaws are in how a lot of scientists don't operate according to what the ethics of science actually is. And another thing, you said that we're doing it all wrong. I don't think he would say that himself. I would say he's going to help you refine things. Okay, because you have located a lot of things, but we need his expertise to help us refine what we're doing. So he's really fascinated with what you and other paranormal investigators are doing. I think he wants to help improve it.
I agree, yeah. Yep, I agree. By the way, Laine, Charlie and I, we were talking about it at Lilydale, and we've known each other for 25 years. I mean, we go way back into the 80s, and I remember in probably 1990 or the spring of 1991, when I was doing collecting the stories from my very first Ghosts of Gettysburg book, I saw that Charlie was giving a lecture on ghosts, and so I went and listened to the lecture, and once again it helped the ball rolling here with the first Ghosts of Gettysburg book, which, as you know, is now gone to 6. and also opened his files. I mean, he was having his students research rumors of ghosts and hauntings in Gettysburg back in the late 1970s and early 1980s. So Charlie has been involved in this in a long time, for a long time in many different ways. So Charlie comes as really one of the pioneers.
I was just thinking of the word pioneer because you were talking about that the other day, about how there are a lot more shows on the paranormal since you and I were in the Ghosts of Gettysburg. Right.
In fact, he was in the very first Ghosts of Gettysburg videos that we did with Greystone Communications back in 1990, mid-90s. So, and Charlie was the one who added the gravitas, as far as I'm concerned, to the programs, because there's Dr. Charles Emmons from Gettysburg College, and I was just Mark Nesbitt, writer, / historian. So Charlie's always added a little bit. I always like to get Charlie involved with these because he's well spoken and he definitely has that air of the PhD comes along with him. So that's always good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
There were professors like you when I was in school. I never got a cool research project like that.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Well, you could tell by their papers that the kids were really enthusiastic about it. I mean, and it was good data too, because what did we discover, Charlie? At one house, 2 sets of college students lived in the same house. They really hadn't communicated, and the same events were happening to
right.
sets.
Yeah, see, that's one of the things that I like to tell people, that when they say, "Oh, you can't study religious or spiritual or paranormal things scientifically," well, of course you can. I mean, you might not be able to put it in a test tube, but when you get corroboration from a number of sources, that's a scientific method, and I call it one of the methodologies for the mysterious.
We have to go to a break, but we'll be right back with Dr. Charlie Emmons of Gettysburg College after this brief message.
The Ghost Channel is your online source for all things paranormal. Ghosts of Gettysburg author Mark Nesbitt and investigative medium Laine Crosby have paired up to bring you ghostly content from their own experiences, as well as from other investigative teams from around the globe. Log on to ghostchannel.tv to check out the variety of paranormal podcasts, documentaries, audiobooks, ghost investigations, paranormal series, and psychic encounters that are added daily. And you won't want to miss the Ghost Talkers radio show, available exclusively as a download on the Ghost Channel and webcast on ghosttalkers.net. This paranormal talk show is co-hosted by Mark Nesbitt and Laine Crosby and includes ghost stories not published in Mark's books, as well as interviews with authors, historians, psychics, and other paranormal investigators. If you are an author or paranormal investigator and are interested in becoming a Ghost Channel affiliate, send an email to programming@ghostchannel.tv, and be sure to visit the Ghost Channel online at www.ghostchannel.tv. The Ghost Channel, it's out of this world.
Mark has told me something very interesting about you, and I don't know if we talked about this summer when I saw you at the Lady Farm, but I have wanted to talk to you more about how you became a medium, because Mark said that you and your wife are both mediums, and that you learned how to be a medium. You took classes.
You might say that the first thing that happened in terms of mediumship was just spontaneous. After my mother had died, I started getting stuff, particularly when it got really important. I could hear her voice in my left ear, as if it were in my left ear, but I knew it wasn't outside my head. But I was like, as if I were trying to run through my mind listening to Frank Sinatra sing a song. It would be kind of like that. I have a very good auditory sense, and so I could hear my mother talking. Now, I can't hear her anymore. I just get like ideas in my mind, and it's hard for me to reproduce imagining her voice. But I started getting this, and that's what really got me going, I guess. I became a natural medium after a crisis in my life. There were a lot of other things happening at the same time as well. And then I did get a fantastic reading from somebody that led me to being part of the Spiritualist Church in Erie, Pennsylvania. And as it became a research project, I took many courses in mediumship. So, yeah, I did develop my mediumship, but it did start kind of spontaneously.
How is this affecting your research or impacting how you're doing your research?
Well, this is what you call participatory science, where it's like the scientist drinking his own potion, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, become part of the experiment, so to speak, or part of the study. And sociologists would say he was supposed to study spirit mediums, not become one. However, I think that I know what's going on a lot better this way because I've had the experience myself. I'm going to be helping a graduate student at University of York who's doing a sociology project on how people explain their ineffable experiences, their mystical experiences that you just can't put into words, or I like to say how to F the ineffable, you know, and I think this is a really good sociological project. Now, how in the world could you know what that was like without having the experience? Now, of course, she's going to study it secondhand, but I can help her because I'm both a sociologist and somebody who's had these ineffable experiences. Like when somebody tells me, when I interviewed these mediums and they would say, it felt green. What in the world does that mean? Mm-hmm. But now I understand that better.
Right.
There are a lot of things where you get stuff that it doesn't seem to fit the normal perception, and it's very hard to put into words, but you can see that people are having these experiences and kind of understand where they're coming from, and it helps an awful lot if it happened to you.
Sure.
Right, sure. Right. It's very hard to describe. People often ask, do you see and do you hear? And yes, but I don't see it visually and I don't hear it,
Right. And then, see, now, if you've had that happen to yourself, you're better able to ask questions about it. Like, was it like seeing something out there in front of you? Was it like running a visual experience through your mind? And then you know to ask questions like, oh, you heard it. Did you hear it on the left side or the right side, in front of you, behind you? And you know all these possibilities. Of course, it helps that you interviewed a bunch of people already, too, and then you start understanding the lingo that they're talking about, and it does help.
Speaking as one who doesn't have any of that type of gift, I that's what everybody says, but I really don't think I do.
He's a natural, and he doesn't know what he's doing. But we suspect that Mark is like a battery or something on this EVP. Because there I am in the same room with him. There's obviously no sound in the room. I'm not getting anything on my tape, but he's getting it. I see the red light go on. He's not hoaxing anything. He's getting something. How come Mark is so special?
I know, and he'll hand me the tape recorder. I'll hold it up to the ghost, and I won't get anything. But in Mark's hand, he will get something.
Yeah.
Well, that's not my fault. That's the ghost's fault. Right out loud.
They like you, Mark.
I'm not.
You're a ghost magnet.
But at any rate, the point I was thinking about is that I not having been able to hear or see or like you guys do, because I know a lot of times Laine will walk into a place and I'm like, what are you looking at? I mean, we're in an empty room. This place is jammed. They're bumping into people, and which I can't see. But I can understand, Charlie, how that would, having had that experience, as becoming a medium as you have, that's got to help your understanding of what's going on. So. Yep.
Now, your book, Guided by Spirit: A Journey into the Mind of the Medium. I have not read this yet, and I can't wait to read this book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, and is that similar to the research you're doing in any way?
Well, this is a focus on the mediums themselves and how they think they do things, whereas what I'm doing now is focusing on scientists and how they approach the thing, so it's related, but I'm not, except for maybe people like you who are mediums who are also investigators, I'm not primarily interviewing the people who are having the experiences.
Right.
But what happened in Guided by Spirit that my wife Penelope Emmons and I wrote is that we interviewed 40 living mediums and collected 82 biographies, mostly from rare books that are in the 2 archives in Lilydale, New York, the world's largest spiritualist community.
Right.
And so we got a big database of 122 spirit mediums. And it's quite fascinating to see the commonalities of their experiences. And I can even tell you what percentage had a male spirit guide in the 19th century compared to the 20th century, and that has implications for feminism. And it's just fascinating to get a huge database like that. And of course, we got detailed experiences of individuals. It's not just statistics. It's the fun of seeing what's happened to these various people, and it comes alive when you get the anecdotes of the experiences of all these people, and it was really a lot of fun to do.
You also have Chinese Ghost and ESP.
It did that in like 1979 to 80, and it came out in 1982. I think I'm the first person that really did a cross-cultural study of ghosts, so that I applied this Western parapsychological theory to what was happening in China. And it was amazing that all these theories seemed to fit, and all the same kinds of paranormal aspects of the experience, like the more important parts of the body, you would be able to see, like the top half compared to the bottom half of the body, and the head compared to the others, and see-through, transparencies, and abnormal features of walking. Everything that was in the literature for the United Kingdom and the United States really applied to China. And in fact, the Chinese theory of ghosts, the popular theory, is that they're real physical beings, and they're going to kill you or beat you at mahjong or seduce you or something, and people are generally afraid of them. And all these physical effects would be expected, but they didn't show up in the first-hand reports. They were more like what the parapsychologists said, that these are ESP experiences. Now, of course, in hauntings, you do get physical effects as well, but the actual apparitions are almost always non-physical. Like you try to grab a ghost and it'll either disappear or you'll have some funny feeling as your hand goes through it. And so it all fit. The parapsychologists, were jumping up and down. I got good reviews from Scott Rogo and Carlos Osis, and nobody had ever done this before. And it showed that there's really a universal ghost experience, and it's not just created by our culture.
I found it fascinating. In fact, we bought up bunches and bunches of the book, and really it sold out pretty quickly in our shop there in Gettysburg. But you're right, Charlie. The key to that book is, and its importance is the fact that it shows that it doesn't matter what culture you're in. The ghosts are the same. They do the same things, and it's. So once again, you're removing the social baggage that we all have with our individual societies, and you have, granted, you may have in one society ancestor worship, in another society you don't have that, and yet both societies have the same experiences when it comes to ghosts, which I think that's important.
Yeah, it is. And, Jim McLennan, who is a sociologist, was inspired by my book. I'm surprised anybody actually read my book. But anyway, he was inspired by it. No, I get emails still from people in China who've read my book on Chinese ghosts. But this guy, Jim McLennan, was inspired by this and did his own research cross-culturally in China and other places, and he started going all over the world and finding how similar all these experiences are. And he has pushed what he calls the experiential source theory. So as a sociologist of religion, question that we have is, okay, do we have the beliefs we do and the experiences we do because the culture tells us to have it? That's the cultural sources theory. Or is it that the experiences come first, and then that creates the culture? And there are variations on the culture, but basically he supports, and so do I, the experiential source theory. People have paranormal experiences like this all over the world, and that's why you can never kill religion. Religion will always come back. Spiritual religious ideas are based on these experiences with variations on a theme.
Yeah.
Have you looked at mediums from other cultures as well?
Well, I did mediums in the Chinese ghost book. I went to one medium about 6 times, and that really blew my mind because she was telling me stuff about my aunt who had died and about my mother, and I'm thinking, this is halfway around the world. How can she know this? Now, of course, nowadays we realize, remote viewing doesn't matter how far away it is. They spied on the Soviet Union from over here. And the CIA used them to do this, and this one woman, according to Russell Targ, told me she described exactly what Brezhnev's office door looked like and what his desk was like, and eventually Russell Targ got to go over there and he saw his office, and it was just like she described. It's just mind-blowing. So distance doesn't matter and time doesn't matter. But I was blown away at the time of what this medium was doing. And then I also went to another kind of medium. And so I did a little bit on Chinese mediums then. And of course, they're important because they have to tell you what your ancestors want. So they have to get in touch with your ghostly relatives. And then I read other things in the literature about mediums in other cultures as well.
That brings to mind, for example, Akashic fields or morphic fields. In other words, the theory that there's one great field, and it doesn't matter whether you're on the Earth or on Mars or in this universe, that there's one great field that we can all tap into if we care to, or if we have been trained to, which is basically what you've done with in the most recent years of your life is trained yourself to be a medium to tap into this massive field, which seems, I don't know, what's your opinion on that, Charlie? It seems more and more to me that it's becoming a reality that and less of a theory.
Well, you're talking about Rupert Sheldrake probably with morphic fields. He's one of the guys I'm trying to get a hold of in England to interview when I go over there.
Oh, that'd be great.
I don't know exactly what name to put to it or how it works or anything. Something like that is going on. And the universe is one. We know that, and the easiest way to demonstrate it in just plain old normal science is what they all say in physics, that every material thing in the universe has a gravitational pull on everything else. Well, if that's not enough to show that we're all one and interconnected, I don't know what is. Now, of course, the gravitational pull on us from Pluto is so minor that we can't detect it, but it's there. And Einstein said that. All these other scientists say it. I said it in my science knowledge in the New Age class this past semester, and one science major said, "Oh no, we were taught that that's not true. That there isn't really a gravitational pull on everything." I thought, "Oh geez, here I am talking science. I don't know what I'm talking about." And then I went and read it several other places that yes, every material thing in the universe has a gravitational pull on everything else. Now, what other connections are there in the universe that we haven't figured out?
Didn't Rupert Sheldrake have a book on animals and their telepathic powers, how they can always find their way home?
That's one of my favorites. It's called Dogs Who Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home and Other Unexplained Powers of Animals. And one of the animals was JT. It was a Scotch Terrier, I think it was a Scottish Terrier. And when I sent my email to Rupert Sheldrake, well, of course, he doesn't get all his own emails, but the Pam Smart, who owned JT, answered my email. And I said, I know you. I know your famous dog. Yeah. So at least I'm going to get to talk to Pam and maybe JT if JT's still alive, even if I can't find Rupert.
Well, that is no pun intended. That's one of my pet theories. That animals, have, and I have many accounts. I'd like to collect many more of animals that alert to something that that we can't see. Now, my theory is that when we go into a situation where all of a sudden there's a paranormal experience, a ghost. We see something. All of a sudden, we have all this baggage. We say, well, there's something under my contacts. It's I had too much to drink last night. It's my imagination, blah, 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 Whereas animals don't have that baggage. They just alert, and they'll growl or they'll bark.
I've seen that happen.
Oh,
so I didn't know what in the world they were seeing.
Exactly.
Hey, that reminds me, Mark, one of my favorite things about animal ghosts, and this is very sad, actually, but you know how smart pigs are. They really are very intelligent. And I'm a vegetarian because I don't want to kill animals, so you can see I would feel a lot for this one. There were people in Hong Kong who, firsthand reports, told me that in this place where pigs used to be slaughtered, but the slaughterhouse was not there anymore. It had been gone for 20 years or something. At night, they would hear pigs squealing.
Oh, wow.
So that was a haunting. It was a pig haunting.
Well, we have numerous accounts of animals that appear as ghosts, everything from auditory in Gettysburg, people will hear horses clopping by, and they'll look out the window and nothing's there, or horses snorting or whinnying. And we have that. We also have sightings of various animals as well. In my stories, I have numerous sightings of ghostly animals. So, geez,
mm-hmm. And they come through spirit mediums too.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, really?
Come through the spirit mediums. One of my favorite ones. This shows the kind of confirmations that mediums need to show that they're not crazy in a supposedly rational culture. This one medium said she got this image of this dog smoking a cigar. This is in the Guided by Spirit book. And she thought to herself, I can't tell this woman I'm seeing this dog smoking a cigar. She's going to think I'm nuts. But you got to give it. You got to give it or you won't get anything else, is what they say. So she gave this message, and the woman started to cry and said, oh, yeah, it's my little dog. And the woman explained that they were at the end of a milk truck route when milk was delivered by milk truck. And the guy, when he got to the end of his milk truck, he would turn right around right at their house and throw his cigar out the window of the milk truck. And their little dog would run after the cigar and pick it up and run around with it in its mouth, and it looked like it was smoking a cigar.
Oh, my goodness. That's great.
I've had several experiences with animals coming in. Donkeys, horse, donkey, gerbils, lots of cats, lots of cats. Once a woman came through with 30 cats, but they do come through. They're
amazing.
They're over there in a good place.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, so tell me a little bit more about your trip coming up.
I know that one place we're going to stay is Bath. Now, you'd say Bath in the United States, but we're staying about like a stone's throw from the Roman baths in Bath, which is southwestern England. And I said to Penelope, my wife, I said, where we are, that place was lousy with Romans. Is they going to be like, we're going to, let's try to tune into the Romans walking through the streets, So it could have been in a place like that, but they had, they were all over the place in southern England. So I'm not really sure where that particular thing comes from, but I'm going to try to tune in.
Are you going to get a chance to go to any of the World War II airfields? Because apparently many of those are haunted.
Gee, I haven't thought about that. I don't even know where they are. We're going to be in Edinburgh. And there's somebody there I'm interviewing. We're also going to Oban, sort of the northwestern Scottish islands, and the Findhorn. Now, Findhorn is a very spiritual place. It's where they talk about the fairies and the divas, or devas, whatever you want to pronounce it, and how they grow these huge vegetables there. I'd heard of Findhorn, and so there might be a lot of alternative people there, and somebody I want to interview there. And so we're going there, and then after Edinburgh, we're in 2 weeks in Scotland. Before that, 2 weeks in Greece, but I'll go to a lot of haunted places there, probably all the ruins and stuff. And then when we come into England, we're going to go to Bath first, and then York, and then Deal by the coast, which is where Julius Caesar landed. Then we go to a place called Crystal Palace.
I'm pretty sure that the airfields are south of London, in the southern part of England, because the shortest hop, and stretch the flights out more. But I have heard, in fact, Walt Powell, whom you may know from the borough of Gettysburg, had explored a number of those and confirmed that the stories of their haunting is true. They see American airmen, obviously, who had flown off and never returned, at least in this life, seen on the airfields out there, the abandoned airfields and in some of the buildings. But that, maybe I piqued your interest now. You're going to start.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to do ghost investigations, but if I get the people in the Ghost Club and talk to them about their methods and stuff, which I'm interested in, they might just take me on some kind of junket down there if they're doing an investigation.
Oh, that'd be great. Laine, being with and associating with people like Charlie, it's so great in terms of the field, the field of paranormal studies, to get somebody like Charlie involved, and because it just lends so much more credence to what we're doing. I think, and people makes it more difficult for people to say, well, it's just your imagination, and it also always bothers me, when the government, the Park Service at Gettysburg does stuff like that, because we all know 1,000 stories later that something's going on at Gettysburg. So, and of course, Charlie's been there as long, if not longer, than I have. So, it's good to have him. Good to have him on our side.
Yeah, I always cringe a little bit when I start talking about these things in places that I'm not sure are safe. But when you do stuff like this, you have to that goes with the territory. You can't be surprised if you don't get a grant. You can't be surprised if somebody's going to laugh at you. You have to have a little courage, because if you were just going to say what the mainstream authority figures were going to let you say, you'd never get anywhere. So you just have to take a chance.
Right. Well, I think for a lot of people, I know this is my case, the curiosity just goes beyond the fear of being humiliated.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I have a curiosity addiction. I've said that many times, and that's what keeps me going. I can't imagine being at a big university and studying and learning more and more about less and less, and then But I'm very eclectic. I do all kinds of things, and you're like that too, Mark. Very eclectic and go into a lot of areas, and it's just a lot more fun that way. And if you're going to spend this life, why do something that's not any fun?
Yeah, I agree. And the study is it's maybe getting a little bit off the point with some of the popular programs that are out there. That's a good thing and a bad thing, because you have these popular programs out. And they may not be doing it quite the way, we should be doing it, but they're also giving a mass exposure to this type of thing.
Well, see, that's what happens when you don't have social control. A profession controls things, and then the upside to that is that you get standards. The downside is that it becomes overly restrictive and in the interests of some narrow group, and they prevent other people from contributing. It used to be that anybody could be a scientist. And before the end of the 1800s, it was common for people to do popular science. But by the end of the 1800s, you had to have a terminal degree and be part of a professional association. But some people say, well, that's great. You kept the quacks out of medicine and so on. But it also killed homeopathy and a bunch of alternative medicines.
Right.
And so that there's always an upside and a downside to organizing something and controlling it. Right.
Well, and yet that type of thing is coming back.
Yeah. Oh, sure. That's my position too. That normal science is losing its grip because people don't trust normal science anymore. They realize that it's in alliance with big business and big government, and that's not what science was supposed to be. Science was supposed to be an open inquiry, not just a way of making money and controlling people.
Right. Well, one good sign is that the insurance company, the health insurance company that we have in our business, also gives benefits for alternative medicine.
Yeah.
Certain alternative medicines, and I think a lot of the insurance companies are starting to realize that. I mean, you got to have a healthy mind in order to stay healthy and to do a good job.
Yeah, well, in our wellness program at Gettysburg College, they even recognized the spiritual dimension. I thought, oh my goodness.
Wow.
I got credit on my health insurance for putting in that one of my goals was to meditate more.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah, so you were allowed to do, quit smoking, you were allowed to do weightlifting, and you were allowed to meditate.
That's great. Well, when mainstream places like insurance companies and universities and that type of thing start to recognize this, hey, we're on the cutting edge, man. That's all I can say.
We have to cut away to a word from our sponsor, the Doubleday Inn. It's where I stay whenever I'm in Gettysburg, with innkeepers my friends Todd and Christine Thomas, and some of the friendliest ghosts you'll meet in Gettysburg.
Experience Gettysburg's only bed and breakfast located right on the national battlefield. Situated on the site of the fierce fighting of July 1st, 1863, today the Doubleday Inn serves as your oasis of peace on the Gettysburg battlefield. Enjoy the peaceful ambiance, attention to detail, and exceptional customer service that have made us Gettysburg's premier lodging destination. Hosting discerning travelers for more than 20 years, the Doubleday Inn features 9 guest rooms with private baths, each decorated in unique country fashion with Civil War accents and antiques. Enjoy all the comforts of home, including candlelit country breakfasts, tea and cookies each afternoon, central air, Wi-Fi access throughout, and panoramic battlefield views from every window. Is the Doubleday Inn haunted? Well, our guests tell hundreds of stories, and we invite you to come investigate for yourself. We're located directly across from Iverson's Pit, site of one of the original Gettysburg ghost stories. History and hospitality await at the Doubleday Inn. Visit doubledayinn.com for photos, descriptions, rates, and availability. Don't miss your chance to sleep on the battlefield tonight.
Welcome back to Ghost Talkers on the ghostchannel.tv with Charlie Emmons.
Can I interview you on one question right now and ask you that?
Sure.
How do you know? I was there on that one investigation with you, and I'm wondering, how does she know? What is she thinking? Do you ever ask yourself, am I making this up?
In the very beginning, I did, but I don't anymore because it comes in very differently than anything else that I get. One, I'm just not that creative to be able to make some of this stuff up.
I've heard that before with mediums who said I couldn't make this up.
No, there's no way I could think of it. It's way too involved.
I've had that experience. I have a ghost story told by a ghost at the Gettysburg Hotel where Laine, Julie, and Patty were all involved, and they came up with this independently. They came up with the same guy telling them this wild, fantastic story, and it was all the same. He told them all the same story. So I'm sorry, Laine, for interrupting, but that's a fascinating part of it, I think.
That's so true. That's another point I was going to make, that we get confirmation all the time. I mean, I do this so often with Mark and Carol, and they are able to document this with historical records so much of the time that I just know that it's right. I mean, I trust in that now. Remote viewing is something that I've always been able to do my whole life, and it's something that I've always accepted because I didn't really think of it as paranormal. I would just see somebody before I met them, or I would go to somebody's house and walk through their house before I would ever show up at a party and to the same house that I had just walked through in my mind, that type of thing. And it was just something I just accepted and never really rationalized. So that's something that I've spent many years doing, and so that's something that I know now that I accepted if I'm remote viewing it. And then all these other things have come along through experience and through doing this so much and having it confirmed. I can tell what it feels like to have it. I guess in the beginning, how do I say this, you sort of use your imagination to open up to this gift, but at this point, it's easy to tell what is just imagination and what is just me opening my mind and letting it come in.
Yeah, when I get you on videotape, I'll explore all those things that you said. Now, here's something that I find interesting. Scott Rogo is somebody that I always trusted, and I guess that I liked him even more when he said that my book, Chinese Ghosts, was a refreshing change from the nonsense. I thought, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. He agrees with me. And so that made my whole thing, and I was just so happy. But he said one thing that goes against using mediums. He said he doesn't like to use mediums in studying hauntings. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. What's his rationale? And so that's one of these things I disagree with him. And he said that there's no way to verify this stuff, and you really don't want to use mediums, and they'll give you all kinds of stuff. And I thought he must have had some kind of bad experience. But the thing is, when some people would say, well, that's not scientific, using mediums. But you just pointed out how you can triangulate with other things. Like Mark has often talked about how he'll draw the medium aside and have the medium say some things without hearing anything from the people who had the experiences, and then try to correlate and see if there's any connection. Now, of course, sometimes you might not be able to find a connection, but it's like when I was out there on that one thing we were doing, I got all this stuff about horses. We may never be able to find out if there were horses kept there during the battle, but that doesn't mean that we know that there weren't either. And it's also possible that I did some kind of displacement, like maybe I'm picking up on something that happened down the road or something, and that they just wandered through. There's all kinds of things. Plus, these mediums I interview, they say we're not 100% accurate, or we misinterpret. Someone will say it's all true, but we've misinterpreted some of it. And this one guy said anybody who's more than 80% accurate has got some kind of a trick going on.
Well, it's interesting. We have all these different abilities, and we can use them to check and double check. Like Patty gets her information. She may get the same information I do, but she may get it in a very different way. Like I do a lot of remote viewing, and if I can't exactly hear, I'll ask the spirit, hey, write it on a sign and hold it up so I can see it.
I like that, yeah.
So Mark gets so upset because he'll want to take me somewhere, and he won't tell me where we're going. And he won't even he can attest to this.
Yeah.
I'll remote view it before I go.
Yeah.
And and I draw pictures, and it's gotten so that I'll see who was there, and I'll see conversations they've had and get names, and I'll type it all up so when we go there, I'll pull it out and say, well, this looks like my drawing.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, you visited here before. And she said, well, sort of.
Right.
But that's kind of a confirmation there. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, Charlie, you'll be interested in this because we were at a place called Chatham outside of Fredericksburg, and Laine had never been there before. And she and her husband and kids were going to come, but all of a sudden a series of things, talk about synchronicity, a series of things, everything from locking her keys in the car to this, one thing or another, prevented them from coming. So Carol, my wife, said, well, why don't you just remote view the place? So Laine's doing this as Carol's talking to her, and I'm getting, as I say, skunked with EVP. I'm getting no EVP whatsoever. So all of a sudden, Carol puts me on the phone with Laine. Laine said, all right, look at the house. Now, look to the left, and there are two trees. They're two old trees. They were there at the time of the battle. And I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I said, okay, they're right there. What should I do? She said, go and stand in between those two trees, and you'll get EVP. And sure enough, I did. And those trees were outside the room in the house that was used as the operating room. So Laine, not ever having been there, remote viewed it and helped me get EVP there. So what's your take on that? What's your take on that, Charlie?
Well, my take on it is I wish I had this on videotape because then I'd put it in my movie.
No worries, you can do it again.
I'm thinking maybe I should interview the two of you together because usually you don't do that. But the two people who have worked together like that would be fun to have you both sitting there talking to each other, and that would be a great thing. And that would make the cut in my movie.
Oh, great. Okay. All right.
See, I don't expect that I'm going to get famous making my movies, but I did make one movie on drum circles, and I love to do this.
Right.
I'm making another one on New Age voices or something like that. And then all these interviews and things that I'm getting on digital videotape for this new project, Scientific Search for Spirit, for which I want to have both of you in this movie, that I will put that all together.
Well, that's a good endorsement, Laine, that somebody wants us in their movie with our experiences, so that's good. The other thing that Laine did in the vault at the bank there, she saw a fella who was dressed in a blue uniform, and she assumed, obviously, being in Gettysburg, that he was a Union soldier, but he told her that he was from Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. He wasn't just an ordinary Union soldier. And I said, do you get a name? She said, yeah, I get the name Cull Burt Son. Well, what she didn't know is that there was a unit that fought at Gettysburg, Company K, called the Boys Who Fought at Home. And I knew, but she didn't know, that there was a monument to them in the square. So during our lunch break, I went over there, and I started going down the list on the back is a list of a roster of the guys, and I'm going down through the A's, through the B's, and I'm saying this is never in a million years going to happen. And I get down to CULBERTSON. There was a Culbertson with that unit.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't have a film of me right then, because the words that came out of my mouth would not be able to be on TV, I guarantee it.
And the first name was James Frederick, but it just had James F.
James F. Just amazing, Charlie. Just amazing. Yeah. So that's the type of thing that to me can't be denied.
Yeah, those are evidential cases, we call them.
Yeah, if it was, I see a John Smith, he's here talking to me. Well, okay. You know what I mean? But
Right.
Colbert's son and James F., that's just amazing.
Well, another thing is that those are the things that are hardest to get. Getting names and things that are written, because most remote viewers don't enter into a rational kind of linear names and numbers thing. They get pictures. So
right.
Get names. Spirit mediums don't usually get names accurately. I mean, sure, names come through, but they're the hardest thing to get. You'll get more like a face of a dog with a cigar in its mouth. So some people are good at getting names, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just because of the nature of the work we do, and that we're doing it on investigations. I don't go out there and do readings for people. We're trying to get very specific data, which we can then come back and be able to confirm.
Yeah.
So we're out there looking for that kind of data. You think
you can do it? That's great.
Well,
that's one of the reasons I like doing historical places, especially Civil War or places that they have lots of documentation. There are lots of records, and so it's one thing to go into Aunt Matilda's attic and say, "Oh, there's a spirit here. It's Uncle John," and you're like, "Well, I don't know. Maybe there was an Uncle John that lived here at one time or not." Whereas if you go to, say, Gettysburg or something and pick up a name like Culbertson and then document it on a monument out there or in the archives, I mean, that's tough to debunk.
Right.
And I think actually the people that we're dealing with now are getting more sophisticated too, Charlie. In other words, that crowd at Lilydale and the people we talk to in our Mysterious Journeys weekends, I mean, we have some PhDs in there. We had a woman that was a neurobiologist from Johns Hopkins. We had principals from high schools and everything, as opposed to 10 or 12 years ago, some of the conferences we had. All these people wanted to do was get pictures of orbs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It may be some of the same people who've gotten more sophisticated through their reading and everything, but we're drawing some very, very sophisticated individuals to these get-togethers anymore, and that's good.
The very fact that this society needs a scientific explanation for the spirit world tells you something to begin with. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't like science. I really do like science, but that's not the only way to know things either. So you could say, well, spirit mediums know things, and that's not science. Well, it can be science if you're doing like what you and Laine do, where you're checking things, and so these things can come together. So you got a lot more people now talking about bringing science and religion or spirituality and science together, and because we do have two sides of our brain, we might as well use them both.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and why can't so the split between science and religion, it didn't really completely happen until after Darwin. We're told that this happened with Copernicus and Galileo, but there were a lot of people, including Isaac Newton, later than them, who were very interested in all kinds of what we now call occult things and magical things and stuff like that. And they had very open minds, and they were looking at everything, and they didn't separate these two things as much as we do now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're beginning to come back and get our whole brains together.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good observation. Charlie, have fun on your trip, and please get in touch when you get back. Now, are you teaching winter or spring semester?
Teaching in the spring, yeah. I'm teaching sociology of religion.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Laine.
Yeah. Thanks again. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it. And we'll be in touch when you get back.
Yeah,
We'll all
thank
try
you.
to get together.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 And thank you also to our listeners for listening to Ghost Talkers on theghostchannel.tv. Also sponsored in part by Haunted America Tours at hauntedAmericaTours.com. And don't forget to check back in on Halloween for a special interview on witches by Dr. Rosemary Ellen Guiley. Rest in peace.